Welcome to Tabo Eminent Channel. On June 13, 1966, the U.S. Supreme Court hands down its decision in Miranda v. Arizona, establishing the principle that all criminal suspects must be advised of their rights before interrogation. Now considered standard police procedure, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can, and will, be used against you in court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford one will be appointed to you, has been heard so many times in television and film dramas that it has become almost cliché. Thanks for watching. Request you to subscribe the channel. Background. The case involved Ernesto Miranda, who was arrested and confessed to a crime without being informed of his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination or his Sixth Amendment right to an attorney. The Supreme Court's ruling. The court ruled that suspects must be informed of their rights before being interrogated while in police custody. This decision led to the creation of what we now call the Miranda warning. The roots of the Miranda decision go back to March 2, 1963, when an 18-year-old Phoenix woman told police that she had been abducted, driven to the desert and raped. Detectives questioning her story gave her a polygraph test, but the results were inconclusive. However, tracking the license plate number of a car that resembled that of her attackers brought police to Ernesto Miranda, who had a prior record as a peeping Tom. Although the victim did not identify Miranda in a lineup, he was brought into police custody and interrogated. What happened next is disputed, but officers left the interrogation with a confession that Miranda later recanted, unaware that he didn't have to say anything at all. The confession was extremely brief and differed in certain respects from the victim's account of the crime. However, Miranda's appointed defense attorney, who was paid $100, didn't call any witnesses at the ensuing trial, and Miranda was convicted. While Miranda was in Arizona State Prison, the American Civil Liberties Union took up his appeal, claiming that the confession was false and coerced. The Supreme Court overturned his conviction, but Miranda was retried and convicted in October 1966. Remaining in prison until 1972, Ernesto Miranda was later stabbed to death in the men's room of a bar after a poker game in January 1976. As a result of the case against Miranda, each and every person must now be informed of his or her rights when in custody and about to be interrogated. However, on June 23, 2022, the Supreme Court ruled that law enforcement officers may not be sued for damages under federal civil rights law for failing to issue the Miranda warning to suspects. The Miranda rights were established as a result of the 1966 U.S. Supreme Court case Miranda v. Arizona, a decision that significantly reshaped American law enforcement procedures. The case centered around Ernesto Miranda, a 24-year-old man from Phoenix, Arizona, who was arrested in 1963 on charges of kidnapping and rape. During a police interrogation that lasted 2 hours, Miranda confessed to the crimes. However, at no point was he informed of his constitutional rights, specifically, his right to remain silent and his right to have an attorney present during questioning. Miranda's defense attorney argued that the confession should not be admissible in court because it was made without proper legal safeguards. The case eventually reached the Supreme Court, which ruled in a 5-4 decision that the confession could not be used as evidence because it violated Miranda's Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination and Sixth Amendment right to legal counsel. The court held that custodial interrogation is inherently coercive and that suspects must be clearly informed of their rights before questioning begins. As a result, the Miranda warning was born. Police officers across the United States are now required to recite a standard warning to anyone taken into custody before interrogation. This includes informing the suspect of the right to remain silent, that anything said can be used in court, the right to an attorney, and the right to have one appointed if they cannot afford one. These warnings are now so familiar that they are frequently heard in television shows and films, but their origin lies in a profound moment of legal reform meant to protect individuals from unfair treatment during police investigations. The Miranda decision remains one of the most influential rulings in American criminal justice history. Though it has been challenged and modified over the years, the core principle, that individuals must be informed of their rights to ensure fair treatment, continues to be a cornerstone of law enforcement protocol and civil liberties in the United States. After the Supreme Court's decision in Miranda versus Arizona, the legal system underwent significant changes. Law enforcement agencies across the country were required to adapt their procedures to ensure compliance with the ruling. This marked a turning point in how police conducted interrogations. Before the Miranda decision, it was common for suspects to be questioned for hours, sometimes under intense pressure, without ever being told they had the right to remain silent or to request a lawyer. In many cases, confessions were obtained not because a person was truly guilty, but because they didn't know they could refuse to answer. The ruling in Miranda's case caused controversy. Some critics argued that it would make it harder for police to solve crimes, as they feared suspects would simply refuse to talk. However, others praised the decision as a necessary step toward protecting individual freedoms and preventing abuse of power. Over time, the Miranda warning became a routine part of arrests and an essential symbol of American justice. It was seen not only as a legal requirement but also as a statement of principle, that every person, regardless of their background or the crime they were accused of, had rights that must be respected. Interestingly, Ernesto Miranda himself was retried after the Supreme Court overturned his original conviction. Although his initial confession was thrown out, prosecutors used other evidence, and Miranda was once again convicted and sentenced to prison. He served several years and was released in 1972. His later life was troubled. He was arrested multiple times but never again convicted of a serious crime. When police arrested a suspect in his murder, they read him the Miranda rights, the very same warning that had been created because of Miranda's own case. Today, the Miranda rights are more than just words spoken during an arrest. They represent a legal safeguard deeply woven into the American justice system. They serve as a reminder that justice must be balanced with fairness, and that the power of the state must always be checked by the rights of the individual. Over the years, the Miranda rights have been tested in court multiple times. Some rulings have slightly narrowed the scope, but the core principles have remained intact. One important aspect is that the Miranda warning only applies when someone is both in custody and being interrogated. For example, if someone voluntarily walks into a police station and talks to officers, Miranda rights may not be necessary. Despite such nuances, the Miranda warning remains one of the most widely recognized legal protections in the United States. Ultimately, the Miranda rights symbolize the idea that no one is above the law, not even the police, and that every person deserves a fair chance to defend themselves. They remind society that justice should be administered not only efficiently but also ethically.